Okay, good morning, everyone. And again, thank you all for joining us today in our class, Wednesday morning class. Excuse me, pen is mightier than the sword. And, I was talking to a different colleague of mine, and we were talking about ongoing classes. He was asking me like, so how long do you usually keep the class going, for ongoing classes? We always have our specialty classes. We have our Monday night mini series. So how long do you think you could keep a class going? I said, it really depends on the class, and it depends on the crowd in the class, right? The participants of the class. I said, I'm very lucky. I have one class. I actually have two classes, right? That has been ongoing for almost 8 years, right? I'm this class and the class on Shabbos, right? Unlocking the closed book. This class, we've gone through many different things, but it's very rewarding. And it also says a lot about you guys, that you guys are dedicated to learning, dedicated to growing, right? That the thing that usually causes people to get stagnant and to get bored, or because they need something new and something fresh and a new idea and a new thing. Yeah, we've learned a couple of different things in this class, but that is because, not talking, God forbid, against anybody, but there's you need something more than just the learning to encourage you to come to learn. It's something fresh, it's something new, a new idea, a new class, a new topic, right? It says a lot about all of your desires to learn and to grow by continuing to come to class, right? Taught by the same person, right? I know people like hearing different speakers, but I just want to say thank you. It means a lot. And it says a lot about all of you guys. So thank you guys. Okay, let's get cracking. So we are up to page 226, day 77. Now this scenario is something that happens very often, right? It's something that happens very, very, very often in many different ways. And it's something that I'm sure we've all struggled with and dabbled in and try to find the best way to take care of it. And that is like this. What is the case? Someone in your son's class, right? 5th grade, 6th grade, I don't care what grade, right? Your son's class, your daughter's class, right? It's picking a fight with him or her, right? If they're physical, if it's an emotional, if it's comments or whatever it is, right? He got into trouble in the end, right? And ended up humiliated. He's coming. He wants to spell his story, right? They want to tell you what's going on, right? And you're all hyped up on lashon hara, right? On no lashon hara. You're drinking the non lashon hara Kool-Aid, right? So you're all into it. No, we can't talk lashon hara, which is awesome. Not saying it in a negative way, right? That's awesome. And you want to tell your kid, right? I hear, but you're talking about other kids. You're talking to other people. That's lashon hara, right? Should you listen? Or should you guide him away from the topic, explain that otherwise be listening to lashon hara, you'll be speaking lashon hara. Right? So what are you supposed to do? Any thoughts?
I would think you absolutely have to listen to him.
Okay. Marilyn said we absolutely have to listen to him. I see Martha shaking her head. It's good to see you.
Of course, listen, that is your child. Then once you've heard it, at some point, you can help them differentiate between what's just talking about people and what is expressing his feelings about what happened to him.
Okay, so you're saying, of course, listen to him, but try to have that conversation and teach him how to differentiate in between facts and feelings. Okay, anybody else?
Sometimes, I just tell my kids, like, can you just tell me who it is without saying the name? Or sometimes they already say, like, I'm not gonna say the name, but, and sometimes I'm like, wait, I need you to actually tell me the name depending on what happened. Like if the kid punched you, I actually need to know the name. But I think when kids are upset, you have to listen. Just the question is, how do you listen? You can tell them, like, we're trying to not lashon hara.
Okay, so I think we're all saying the same thing. Anybody else? Go ahead, Suzette.
Good morning. So
Morning.
I guess I'm going to agree and also dissent a little bit. I think that we must provide the emotional support I do think that, I think it's important to know who the cause of the problem is. So I want names. And I am honest. I tell my kids, and I guess you will, I know you'll respond to this, but I tell them that, you know, if they don't throw the first fist and somebody else does, they have the right to defend themselves. So that's how I've always raised my kids. I don't want, you know, they're not bullies, but they're not going to be beaten to the pulp by anybody on the playground. And that's how I've always raised my kids. So I think that, you know, you provide the emotional support, but I really think kids need to be able to defend themselves. So
Okay, I'm not going to
that's
disagree
just
with.
from my experience.
Okay, I'm not going to disagree with that comment. Any other thoughts before we delve into this?
I think, you know, this is a young child in whatever grade, but in grade school. So, you know, to already have done that to them, think about like possibly the rage or the buildup as they become an adult. Now, I think it's one conversation to talk about Lashon Hara, but when he comes home and he's been in this situation, it is all emotion. And I don't know, I'm kind of right there in the middle there. I think we need to give them an opportunity. If the name comes out, it's not the worst thing in the world because it's going to stay within the family.
So I'm not going to disagree necessarily with what you're saying, but I just want to home in on the last line that you said, the last couple words you said, because it stays in the family. So if something stays in the family, so that's not Lashon Hara?
No, I'm not saying that, but it's not like.
No, Bonnie, I'm picking on you. I am.
I know you are, and it's okay. No,
because
I'm
because
good.
because
think
what you
about
said
it.
is true.
It's in
But
the class.
what?
It'll stay in the class.
It'll stay in the class. No, because it's important what you just said, and I know that you probably didn't mean it in the way that I'm picking on it, right? But it's just this is just a little bit what we spoke about in last week, I think, or the week beforehand. Lashon Hara doesn't make a difference if it's in the family, if it's between a husband and wife, or a father and son, or a father and daughter, or mother and son, and mother and daughter, right? That's Lashon Hara. That is not the reason why it might not be Lashon Hara. It's just we have to remember that. The other things of, you know, what we'll talk about, you have to get it out. You have to protect your kid. You have to be able to, you know, let them have that emotional, you know, let go, let out, or whatever it is. Those are legitimate reasons of why we could have that conversation. But we have to always remind ourselves, and I don't mean to pick on you, right? But this is always important because it creeps in on us, and I to me also, right? I've had, you know, there's a couple of things that happened, and I was aware of it, and I had to deal with it, whatever it is, and I would love to, you know, sit down and schmooze with Devar about it, right? But, you know, I have to always stop myself and think, am I allowed to? Am I not allowed to? What am I saying this for? What's this? There's many different aspects, either privacy, which is a major aspect, and I don't tell her a lot of things based off privacy, of things that, you know, is confidential, right? Or because it's just, you know, gossip and nothing to do with privacy. It's eventually going to come out and it's not private. I wasn't necessarily told, right? But I was made aware of it, and it's gossip, and there's no reason for it. There's no reason for her. It's not beneficial for her. It's whatever. Right. So sometimes yes, sometimes not. Constantly, am I always, you know, in the right? I'm human. We all fail, right? But we always try to build ourselves up. But we cannot have it lingering in the back of our minds, right? That because it's family or because of this, that's a reason to stay in the family. That's a reason why it's okay. That's not a reason why it's okay. It's okay because you're allowed to express your emotional support. You need some emotional support from your loved ones. You know, that is where family or spouses come in when it'll be okay. So I apologize for harping on this, right? But it is something that is very common. I know I constantly struggle with it. I'm sure everybody struggles with this because we do sort of have this feeling, and it's a healthy feeling that you think that in the family is good. It stays in the family for a healthy family. That's a good attitude, and I'm sure people that don't have a healthy family don't think that way, right? It's a healthy attitude for a healthy family, but regarding the laws of Lashon Hara, that does not apply. That's not even a thought. So we have to get that out of our minds, because that way we're able to actually assess the situation in a proper way, right? If I'm allowed to, if I'm not allowed to. Yes, a spouse and a wife does have a reason why you might be allowed to talk to them more than someone else, but not because it stays in the family. Thank you for actually. Let me rephrase it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to rephrase that.
Oh, welcome.
There you go. Thank you for giving me that opportunity to rephrase that. Okay, so
Can I say one thing, Rabbi?
you wanted to say something. Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
How about the not believing 100% and not acting on it that we learned
Okay,
last week and the week before?
Very
How
good
does that
point.
do?
Very good point. I'm going to bring that in a little bit, and we're actually,
Okay.
we're gonna. It actually plays more of a role in if we get to the next halacha, that aspect, right? But
And one other thing about what Suzette said about the hitting back. I don't know how school systems are here, but in Miami, if it does, both people got suspended if there was a fight at school. So I just got to be careful on that.
You got to be careful, because first of all, it takes two to tango. Usually it takes two to tango, every parent has to have their method of educating their kid, and they know their kid best. If they're a healthy parent, which everybody here seems like a healthy parent, right? That's more of a parenting thing, which we could get into a little bit, and I'm not saying that I'm the expert, right? We all try to do the best we can, but there is a time and a place for everything. There's a time and place of defending yourself. There's also a time and place sometimes of knowing. Sometimes the best way to defend yourself and the best way to get out of a situation is by holding restraint, and by, just letting things ride and moving on. You have to know who you're dealing with. You have to know how to do it. I tell my kids all the time, let me deal with it, right? And not you, right? I will deal with it, of course, if they're beating you up, you're allowed to, block yourself and move yourself and push them out of the way, right? But again, I don't want to get off topic on parenting right now, which is an important topic, and we can do it another time, right? But or on the side after the recording is off, I'll be happy to hang around, right? But regarding this discussion, right? So let's just look at the answer. And you're all on the right track. You're all on the right track. You're all saying the right thing. You just have to expand that a little bit. When your child needs emotional support, it's your job, right? Right? And a constructive purpose to give it. And if you want to tell you if he or she wants to tell you something that he or she is bothered by, but they don't happen, that didn't happen to them, encourage them to relate it without naming names, right? So someone was saying, not naming names, this is that. I want to expand on this a little bit, because this is something that happens a lot, right? And it's something that, it is a tremendous learning opportunity for a child, right? And also a tremendous learning opportunity for us, is because, first of all, our natural instinct is to listen to everything your child says. A healthy parent, again, we're dealing with healthy parents, a natural instinct is to listen to everything your child says, and more than that, to believe everything your child says.
Yeah.
Believe everything your child said. My child, my tatala, right? My maidala, right? My sweetheart, would never do anything wrong. Would never be the instigator, right? Would never lie to me, right? Would never exaggerate the story, right? My child, chas v'shalom, no way, right? Sorry to say, but kids are kids, right? And it happens all the time. Kids expand on the story, they exaggerate the story, right? They forgot to mention a crucial part of how the whole thing started, right? There's many assets. Sometimes they're 100% correct, right? But a lot of times, right, they're not. A lot of times, as the saying goes, it takes two to tango. And it takes two to tango, and it might not have been what happened today. It might have been a buildup from what happened the last 3 days, and therefore that's what happened today. And it might have been small little things that your child has been doing, right, to the other child. That's not big, right? It's not something to talk about, but it's a buildup, and that doesn't make a right of what the child did, but not necessarily is your child, a tzaddik, 100% right. Of course, your child is a tzaddik. right? But it doesn't mean to say that your child doesn't need also some discipline or some teaching or some, encouragement how to, deal with the situation. And that is important, that when we're listening, right? Not naming the child, I agree with Emily, all right? It's only when it's not directly affecting. And then they say, if it's something's bothering that is not directly happened to them, and they point that out, right? If you see that, right? If they want to tell you about something that's bothering, but did not happen to them, to him or her, right? Then you encourage not to relate the name, because it's not directly, and you don't have to go ahead. Your child just wants to, have a conversation about something that happened in school and how to deal with it if it would affect him or her, right? Or how to deal with that problem or whatever it is, and they want to have that conversation, which is important. And I encourage my kids all the time to talk to me. And the kids, it's a healthy thing when kids talk to their parents and ask them for advice or how to deal with something or to understand what happened or how, whatever it is. It's important, right? But if it's not directly to them, so then yes, it's important to try to encourage not to use a name. Now, in a school setting where there's only like 5 kids in the class, right? or 70 kids in the whole school, right? And you know that it's probably not the kindergarten kid, right? Not saying the name, as you mentioned before, is not always going to make it that you don't know who it is, but still, it's still important to say it, because even though you might be able to figure it out, right? And the kid in the back of the mind might still know, but you're still educating them and teaching them that it's not something directly to you in a different situation, right? We don't just say names of people, even though, okay, we all know who it is, right? It has happened. Oh, we all know who it is. No, still, we don't say the name. There's no reason to say the name. We might be able to figure it out, but it's educating, it's teaching that idea that if it's not something directly to you, if it's not something that you need to deal with it and call that parent or whatever it is, right? So then we don't say the name, because that is a way of lessening the Lashon Hara. It is a way of educating ourselves, and it might not make the biggest difference for this case, right? Or as they grow and they get into other situations, or it's if it's something that happened in a bigger area, let's say they're part of a league or something like that, there's many more kids, they're being trained that when it's not something that directed to them, we don't mention names, right? Emily, I'll take your question in 1 second. I just want to bring one more point, and then I'll take your question or comment, right? So that's one thing. Now, when it is directly to the kid, right? That what Martha said, and we're going to talk more about it in the next halacha if we get to it today, which we might not, and that's totally fine, right? There is an idea also, as I mentioned, that when your child is relating over the story to you, you have to, as I said, your natural instinct is to believe everything your child says, and that's a healthy thing. But at the same time, right, you have to try to dig deep behind it and say, okay, this is what you're saying. This is what happened, right? Let's try to think back. Did you might do anything? I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Right? I've heard the same thing, right? But let's take, yesterday, what happened, right? What did you say anything during lunch, at recess? Did you by mistake push the kid in the hallway, whatever it is? Maybe you're hanging out with some friends that said some comments or, said something that, and you were in that group. There's always, and it's not always, right? But it's important to take this opportunity to expand. And this happens with adults too. Telling you, it happens with adults too. And you have 2 people arguing, whatever it is, right? I've found that I've tried to talk to one. I don't know why they're doing this. I don't know why they're saying this, right? But if you take yourself a little bit out of the situation, right? What happened 2 days ago, 3 days ago, a comment that you said, how you said it, right? The way you remember what happened. And then your whole picture is when you take yourself back, your whole picture is clouded by that, right? And therefore you're just tunnel vision, negative, or this person, right? It may be different than children, right? But we are sometimes our own worst enemy, because we don't take ourselves out of the picture. We don't look back to where this source happened. We focus on what just happened. That's important, but it's also important to see the background. to see where, why, how, right? What happened, how am I seeing the situation from a different set of glasses, and especially with children, right? And sometimes parents think that they're helping the child by always being on their side. And let me say that in a different way, because the parent always has to be on their child's side, but always thinking that their child is right. You're not helping your child. You're just creating a bully. You're creating a child that thinks that they're always going to have someone watching and they can do whatever they want and they can always get away with it. Right? You're creating a child that is always, everything revolves around them. Right? That's not healthy. Right? Your child, if your child is wrong, your child is wrong. And that's a tremendous lesson to teach them. Right? And regarding the Lashon Hara component over here, right? You have to try to weed out also what is appropriate to this story, right? I've had conversations sometimes, and all of a sudden the conversation turns into something totally different. So it's just related to this story right now. So no. So then let's not talk about it right now. Let's talk about it another time, right? But that's not related to this story. It's a totally different thing. You're going to start talking about how, when they eat their lunch, they make too much noise. But it has anything to do with what happened in the playground? So sometimes maybe yes, sometimes not. So then if it doesn't have to do with what happened in the playground, so then let's not talk about it right now. But there's no reason for it. Even with your child, and when you're talking to them, you also have to minutia the conversation. You have to guide the conversation. That we're staying within Toelis. We're staying within what is necessary for this story. At another time, we could talk about, what happened there, right? But right now, you're coming focused on this story. Let's focus on what happened here, right? So those are just some thoughts. Right, my thoughts based off what we were saying over here regarding this very delicate and emotional scenario that they put in front of us. Emily, go ahead.
Okay, so a comment and a question. So first of all, I think that what you're saying about how to respond with kids, I think it's also kind of true to how to respond to a spouse. It's not, you can also redirect a spouse or, obviously in the most gentle way possible.
Of course. Good
but
point.
I'm saying it's not, what I'm saying, or don't just believe what your spouse says necessarily. But I just had a question. So one of the things that I really struggle with is when there's another kid or whatever it is that I feel my kid wants to play with this kid or do something with kid or this kid or have this kid over or whatever it is. And I feel I don't want that for certain reasons, maybe because I don't, think this kid is a good kid to have in my house, or I struggle with that family, or I don't think that kid is a good influence. So that's something that I really have kind of had a hard time with when my kids are why can't we have this kid over? And then I'm you know what I mean? So it's and I sort of end up trying to say, well, this kid is maybe not respectful. And then I find I'm speaking badly about another kid, but I'm trying to, I don't know. So if you have any advice, maybe it's for after class. I don't know.
No, it's a great question. It's a great question. Anybody have any thoughts about this? We all struggle with this a little bit. It's a great. Jim has something to say. Go ahead, Jim. You got to talk about it.
Sometimes kids we can give them a reason, or there are reasons I can't talk about. And you're going to have to trust me. And that's what you can tell kids. And they may not like the answer, but that's honest and without getting into Lashon Hara.
You guys heard what Jim said?
Yeah.
And that brings to another point that Jim is bringing out. And this is also really important how we educate our kids. And, and it's never too late. Sometimes when it's late, it's harder. Right. But it's important that, and I tell this to my kids sometimes also, this is not a discussion, right? You have to trust me. I'm your parent, and I know you might think that I'm a meanie and I might this. And right now, even though in 5 minutes you can say you love me because Baruch Hashem, what you do, right? But right now you don't like what I'm saying, right? And you're going to say, oh, you don't know, you don't understand me, this, right? But there's certain times that, and not every scenario, and we have to think if there's another way how to address that situation, and there might be, but if it comes down to it, in general regarding educating our kids don't need to be, you don't always have to explain yourself to your kids. You don't. We feel sometimes that we have to justify ourselves to our kids, and because we should show them that we're on it with it. We don't. We don't always have to justify ourselves to our kids. The kids, you have to build a relationship with the kids where they know that you love them, and that you know that you always have the best for them. But you don't have to justify it. It's a society that we've created that's out there that, it's the same society that makes that says that kids should call their parents their first name. It's like they're friends and they're this, and that's the best way to parent. And I've heard parents, and again, if there's anybody on here that is, I apologize, but I've heard where parents feel that, on the contrary, they feel that's building a relationship with a child calls them by their first name. They're friends and parents. No, your child is not your friend. Your child is not your friend. Your child is your child. You love your child, and you are always looking out for your child more than your friends, and you love your child more than your friends, but the child has to know that you're the parent. The child has to know that you have the best interest for them, that you love them, and you do anything for them, but at the same time, you are the parent. And when you create that atmosphere, yes, sometimes you have the ability to go ahead and to explain, right? And sometimes you don't. And when you do have the ability to explain, so then you better go ahead and explain, because you're showing them that you are respecting them and that you care about them. But you don't always have to. Now, I'm not saying this scenario, right, is a time to use that, right? That's what Jim is saying, but that point is extremely important point. And when we build up that point, right, when we build that up, right, and we show the child and we develop that, and it's not something that just, I'm the parent, right? That's not how it works, right? So then you're just asserting yourself on your kids, and especially in our generation, it's not going to work, right? But it has to be organic, and it has to be that the kids see that, right? But then you would have an easier time saying, hey, listen, I know you might not understand, right? And you might think that I'm not, but right now you have to trust me. I love you, right? And I'm always looking out the best for you. You have to trust me. You have to trust me that we're not having this kid over, right? If that's where we're holding right now, that you can't explain or whatever it is, right? Any other thoughts regarding Emily's question? Go ahead, Susan.
I think one of the things I'm struggling with is a spade is a spade. A rude child is a rude child. So I just can't understand why, if we call a spade, then, not say it's a bucket, why it's Lashon Hara. I mean, it's truthful. And I want to back that up by saying, I mean, even in our sacred Torah, Moses called, children of Israel stiff-necked. That was something anybody wants to reference, but that wasn't Lashon Hara. I mean, they were misbehaving. I mean, so I can't understand why, you're calling the spade out, and now you're being spanked and said, okay, it's Lashon Hara. I just can't see that.
Okay, excellent question. Really, really good question.
Can I just add one thing? It's also like, in some ways, it's educating your child. Like, do you know this, the way that this child speaks to me, right? When this kid is over at my house, like, that's not appropriate, and that child can't come here anymore. Like, I hear what Jim is saying, and I think that sometimes that's like a really good response, but I think sometimes it's also an opportunity to educate your child. Like, the reason why this kid is not invited to our house is because the way they behave. And I know that you're not going to behave that way, or you better, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like there's an education element too, but that I don't also want to speak Lashon Hara.
Okay, so let's expand on this a little bit. And you know what, I'm gonna bring this out through the next page, and I'm gonna come back to this. I'm not hiding from you guys, right? I promise. Right? Let's look at grow. Right, grow your good eyes. Right, on page 227. Right, so it says like this. It says, right, when I've been trying to do my lawn. I actually have to give in and get someone, right, to do it, because it's, I don't know, my backyard's a little too hard to do, it's whatever, it's too hard. That's just,
I have a number if you need.
Oh, thank you. I will take it from you after class. Right. But when you're trying to get rid of weed, right? So there's two ways of getting rid of weed, right? One way is, and sometimes you need to do both. So you have to pull out the weed, right? And you have to get rid of the weed, right? And also, if you put healthy grass, right, then there's no space for the weeds to grow, right? So if you fill the whole thing, you have healthy grass, right? If you have healthy grass, sorry, not glass, but grass, right, everywhere, right? So there's no place for the weeds to start growing. Weeds only grow, right, when there's some, a hole in the healthy grass, right, that there's space for it to now come out, because the weeds don't grow over healthy grass, right? They grow in the cracks of where there's no healthy grass, or in the cracks of the sidewalk, right? Or other places. That's where weed grow. So to get rid of your weeds, right, there's two ways. One is pulling them up and whacking them away, right? Bring out your whack, right? And whacking them away or pulling them up, right? And also, you have to make sure, right, you can avoid the whole situation, or after you do that, to make sure that you have healthy grass everywhere. Look at paragraph 2. Conversation works the same way, right? The more positive ideas and thoughts a person expresses, the less room there is for negative. If we want to ensure that we stay on the right track in our verbal interactions, we can do so by including as much lashon tov, not lashon ra, but lashon tov, positive words, as possible. Negative thoughts, words, right? Criticizing, blah, blah, blah. There's simply no, there's, when you do it in a positive way, there's simply no room, right, for the negative to take roots. And I love this line. Look at the last paragraph. People often think that communication, that a commitment to shmir shalashon, right, the commitment to speaking, not speaking lashon hara, right, means that they must refrain from speaking. And that is a common thing. I can't speak. I'm just going to avoid the situation. I'm not going to come to kids because I don't want to get them in conversation. Right? And sometimes we need to do that if you know that you can't control yourself. Right? It's like, alcoholics shouldn't walk into a bar, right? If they know they can't control themselves. Right? But, however, the best strategy is not to stop speaking. God wants us to speak. He gave us the power of speech. Right? The best strategy is to fill our conversations with positive words, thereby leaving no room for lashon hara to spread. There's no room if we are training ourselves to speak in a positive way, right? If we are training ourselves to always be the positive, right? There's no room for the lashon hara to start creeping in, because we're always looking at the good of people, the positive way. And I'm going to skip for a second, right? Because I think this conversation is extremely important, and thank God today I'm not too big of a rush, right? We have some time if you guys are sticking on. If you turn to page 229, right, in the Grow Your Good Eyes, right? They have two, if you see in the italics, there's two ways of saying things. And it's a similar idea, but there's two ways of saying things. You can't win. People are selfish. What does he know? The teachers can't teach. The speaker was boring. There are a bunch of phonies, right? And these are negative ways of saying things. And not necessarily is it lashon hara, right? You're sort of saying a blanket statement or whatever it is. And some are, some are. And these are just an example. And if we start thinking about it, and we start thinking about the way we say things, right? You'll see that not you guys, because you guys are such righteous people, right? But out there in the world, right, there's a lot of people these are just a few examples. But we could change all that and talk in a different way. It will work out. That was so nice of him or her. Right? It's good to have someone to guide us. The teacher is trying to help you. Right? I learned something new from that speaker. Most people are trying to do the right thing. Right? Most people are trying to do, you're not saying that everybody, you're not saying there's not phony people out there, right? But most people are trying to do the right thing. We have to train ourselves, right? In all of our aspects of talking, right? And especially when we're dealing with our kids, because our kids mimic what we say. Why is it that unfortunately there's kids, 2, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds that are cursing out there in the world? Because they hear that from their parents. Right? Why is there, you see, sometimes it's cute. You hear some kids, saying some big words about the market, right? It's cute. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. Because they hear their parents talking about. Why is there certain kids that talk more about Gedolim, great Torah sages? They hear from their parents, right? The way the kids speak, right? kids, in politics, oh, it's this, it's that, and or some talk so negative about the other opponent, and some just say, we're going to vote for this person, or we don't talk about this stuff because they learn it from their parents. Right? The way you talk, the way you deal with something, right? Our kids learn from us. Our close friends pick it up from us. Our spouses, right? We are influencers all the time. I don't have to have 5,000 friends on Instagram to be an influencer, right? You're an influencer by the way you communicate. And not speaking Lashon Hara doesn't mean to say you don't have to refrain from speaking. On the contrary, trying to speak Lashon Tov, trying to make sure that we're talking in a positive way. And yes, it's always a tricky situation, especially when we're dealing with situations like this. So there are kids, right? And so that to answer your question, Lashon Hara does not mean to say that it's false. That's rechilas, right? Lashon Hara, on the contrary, is when the thing is true. You're not allowed to speak Lashon Hara when the thing is true. You're right, a spade is a spade, right? But just because a spade is a spade doesn't mean to say that I have the right to tell another person that he's a spade, unless it falls under toelis, right? Unless there's a reason for it, because rechilas, there is no toelis in rechilas, because rechilas is false, right? Lashon Hara, right, which is true, that's why there are these different scenarios where you're allowed to speak it, is because toelis, the person's going to get hurt, or you're going to get hurt, or you're trying to help the person, or you need to let some steam off, or whatever it is, and you're doing it in the right way, right? A whole list of reasons why, because it's true. That what the Torah calls the Jewish people Am Youre, or talks about the transgressions of the Jewish people, is a tremendous question, right? And commentaries elaborate on that, right? And I don't want to get into that right now because it's a whole class in itself. And it's a great idea to talk about that, right? If you're not allowed to speak negative, so how could the Torah, right, tell us that the Jewish people sinned last week? They sinned with the water, they sinned with this, right? And we're going to have the golden calf soon, and right? How could the Torah go ahead and tell us this? How could the Torah head go and tell us that Moshe hit the rock instead of talking to the rock, and then the punishment that he got? Excellent question. Excellent question. Right? It's excellent. That's not a reason to say that it's okay. Right? Just because you have a good question, the answer is not always, oh, then it must be okay. Right? There are answers, right? There are answers, and it's a great class, and we should talk about it. Maybe next week or the following week. I'll try to put something together, right? And we could talk about that. It's an excellent question, right? But Lashon Hara is a truth. It is true. But we have to train ourselves how to always talk positive. Now, in this scenario with your kids, right? Again, I'm not saying that I always have the right answers, and a lot of times I don't have the right answers. And I'm a parent just like you are, right? And we're all struggling with this, and especially when we get in the situation, it's always easier to talk about it out of the situation. Especially when we get into the situation, it's always hard how to deal with it exactly, right? But in a situation like you brought up, Emily, where you don't want a certain kid coming around the house, right? Yes, it's important for your kid. It could be a teachable moment that how we act, but there's so many other better ways to teach how we act. I do not like showing my kids how not to act by saying, don't be like that kid. I hold it's terrible. I'm sorry, nothing against anybody else. And if you do that, I could have a conversation. And that's very possible that I'm wrong. It could be that other educators that know a lot more than me think that it is right. But I personally, I think that that's not a good way, because you're teaching your kids to judge other people and to match themselves based on, oh, well, I'm better than that kid. Or I don't want to be like that kid. No, you should teach them in the positive how to act. The way we act in our house is we talk respectfully to parents. The way we talk in our house is that we value everybody's possessions. The way we act in our house is we keep our hands to ourselves. Right? The way we act in our house, and look at how that family, look at how that kid is doing, right? Look at our sage, look at how our stories in the Talmud or stories of whatever, right? Show them in a positive manner, right? Educate them through positivity, right? And not through negativity, how to avoid, not to be something. They have to know what's wrong. I'm a believer in I'm not saying everything should always, let's just put positive prizes and things. No, there is discipline. And they have to be disciplined. But discipline doesn't mean to say that we're knocking someone else down. Discipline is not being positive, right? Discipline is showing that there's consequences to your actions, not based off what someone else did, right? Not comparing them to someone else, but comparing them to them. I was a third boy, right? I was a third boy after 3 boys, right? Okay, that didn't make any sense, right? But I have 2 older brothers, right? I have 2 older sisters, but 2 older brothers, and we're close in age, right? The one right above me is a year and a half older than me, right? The one after that is 2.5 years older than 3 years older than me, and we're close in age. And sort of, I was sort of the one following in their footsteps, right? We all went to the same yeshiva, went to the same school, right? I knew their friends because we sort of interacted with each other. My oldest brother, he skipped a grade, so we weren't always in the same, but I came to high school. I came to high school when he left high school, right? So still, and thank God they were very good students, right? Very good kids, right? And my parents always made sure, right? And this happens all the time with children themselves, with your own family. My parents always made sure not to compare me, right, to my older brothers. Right, my parents tell me afterwards, and I try to do this also because I have 4 girls in a row, right, one after another, right, and I try to tell teachers also, right, this kid is their own kid, right, don't compare them to their older sibling, right, for better or for worse, right. And I remember my parents tell me afterwards, right, you are your own kid, you develop yourself how you are. Right? We'll change you, we'll teach you, right? But not to compare. Kids should not feel that they're being compared, right? They're not being compared. You have your own strengths, you have your own faults, right? You have your own things to work on. We are here to help you and guide you, but you have to develop who you are, and not to try to develop yourself how not to be like the older sibling, or not to be like this friend, or to be like that person, right? There's learning moments and to teach, but not to compare, right? So we always have to try to think in a positive way, right? Why we can't, in our household, we try to, and they might assume from what they're saying, right? But, in our household, we have only positive conversations in the household. And you know what? Right now, we feel that it's best not to have that kid over because we always want to make sure that there's this positive energy or positive conversation, or or everybody playing together, right? Yes, from your words they could detect or say that kid doesn't have that. You're not calling those kids out, and not saying that we can't be like that kid, right? You don't know what's going on with that kid's life, right? You don't know why they're being like that. You don't know what's going on in their home. You think you might know, but you don't. Right? Because everybody thinks they know, they're best friends and I know them so well. You don't know, right? So it's not for us to start judging that kid. It's not for us to start, right, comparing that kid to telling our kid not, that's not good chinuch, and it'll continue that way. When you get older, comparing yourself, that's not good chinuch, right? You just say in our house, we do positive, and therefore we can't have this kid over. Your kid understands from that that kid has that, so they detect it themselves, they learn, but you're not comparing it to them. You're not putting that kid down straightforward, right? And yes, the teachable moment, but you have to make sure that teachable moment comes from being positive to your kids, talking to your kid of how to be, and not saying not to be like that kid or you have to be like that kid, right? But you have to develop yourself with our help, right? With the Torah's help, with how the Torah tells us to act. That's how we grow. That's how we become better people. And we should always try to do that. And we always can do it. Talking positive. Doesn't mean to say that there's no punishment. Doesn't mean to say that we tell them what not to do and we say no. Some people say, oh, you can't tell no to your kid. Of course you can say no to your kid. And it's ridiculous. Of course you say no to your kid. You're the parent. No is not a bad word, right? The kid has to know that they can't have everything. Kid has to know that they don't have the rights to have everything. They have to learn restraint. They have to learn that that's not how life is. You have to know when to say it. Right? You have to know how to say things. That doesn't mean to say that now you could say, if you say no to your kid, then you can tell the kid that, don't be like that kid because they're bad, or talk to them in a negative way. Because no is not a negative word. No, it's actually a very powerful word. You just have to know when to use it. Right? So we have to constantly be on our best, on our tippy toes, right? Yes, parenting is a 24-hour job, right? It's not, you can't take a break, right? And we have the responsibility to constantly be, you are the parent. It's your responsibility. Well, my child, no, you're the parent. Right? I can't control you're the parent. Right? Realize that. Right? You're the parent. You have to have a talk with your kid in a positive way. Right? You have to go ahead, right? You have to go ahead and make sure, right? You have to make sure that your kid is doing positive things. Your kid is what's it called? Is being disciplined. Right? Yes, there's discipline. You have to discipline them because the way they learn how to do things is by realizing that there's consequences. Right? It just reminds me of Pirkei Avos that we did 2 days ago in shul. Right? And between Mincha and Ma'ariv now we're doing Pirkei Avos. Right? We do the Mishnayos. We're up to the cycle of Pirkei Avos right now. Right? And the Mishnah said, right? The Mishnah says that one should be careful with their study, right? Because a lack of being careful with your study, a mistake happens, right? And you'll get punished for it, right? So the commentaries ask, of course, it's important to be careful with your studies and to be diligent in studies, but what is that connected to? If a mistake happens, then you'll get punished for it. First of all, there's a concept of mistakes, right? But it calls it a mistake will be considered like you're doing it on purpose, right? The zadon, right? Skagot will become a zadon. A mistake will become like you're doing it on purpose, and you get punished that way, right? First of all, if it's a mistake, that it's not on purpose. We all do mistakes. We're human, right? Come on, we all know that. King Solomon says, "Not a righteous person in the world that doesn't sin." We do mistakes, right? So why would it be okay? You'll get punished as a mistake. I'll give you another chance, but why does it say that it'll be considered like on purpose? And I saw this beautiful explanation that what Pirkei Avos is telling us, right? I forgot who the author was, Rabbi Yehuda, or I don't remember who it was, right? But what he's telling us is that if you are not diligent in your studies, right? Means to say that I learned this when I was a kid, right? Or I learned it once, I'm okay, I don't have to review it, right? Or, I'm just going to skim through this, right? The laws of kosher, I'm just going to skim through the laws of kosher. It's fine, milk and meat, then okay, good, right? It can be a pig, right? I'm good, right? Or even if you get into more, if we're not diligent about our learning, we're not diligent about reviewing it and making sure that we learn it all, we learn it properly, we learn it from a right educator, right? That's also part of it, right? We're not learning from right educator. If you're not diligently learning, then when you make a mistake unintentionally, it is as if you're doing it on purpose because you're the one that caused yourself to do it as a mistake because you didn't learn it properly, right? You didn't study it properly. Of course, if you put your effort and you put your time, God's not expecting all of us to know everything, right? We all grew up in different environments. We all grew up with different levels of knowledge and different opportunities. But God wants you that when you start having the opportunity, you start learning, you start doing the best you can, right? You're diligent in your learning. You review it, you learn it, you make sure you're learning it all properly. Then on those things that you have the opportunity to learn properly, and if you make a mistake, that's a mistake. That's not on you. But there's a cause and effect. If you're not learning it properly, if you don't review it, right? If you rely on what you learned in kindergarten or in day school or whatever it is, right? So then that's not a mistake. It's a cause and effect. That's not a mistake. You have to hold yourself responsible, right? And it's the same thing with us educating our children and our kids knowing that there's a cause and effect. Right? They have to realize also, right, that their actions mean something. They can't just always get away and rely, my daddy's going to get my mom is going to get me out of this, right? They're always going to take my side, right? They're going to call the other one and, they're whatever, the more influential, they're whatever they, right? Always going to cuddle me. It's important to cuddle your kids. I'm a big believer in that. I sit on the couch with my kids and, cuddle with them. Sometimes as they get older, they don't want to anymore, right? I'm sure y'all experienced that, right? They don't want to kiss anymore in public, of course, right? Right? But it's important to do that. But you also have to show that there's discipline and show them where they're wrong, right? There's a cause and effect, right? They have to do that, right? So I know I sort of got a little off topic, right? But back to our discussion, Emily, your question, right? Sometimes it might just be easier saying, listen, this is the reason, when you get older, or you might understand, at a different time we could talk about it, right? But right now, I just need you to trust me. This is the reason, right? You have to trust me. And it's not necessary for this case, it's for other things. I've told my kids sometimes, this is the way it is right now. What do I have to do there? Why can I go there? What? Right now, you have to trust me, right? You might not be happy about it. You have to trust me, right? And at a later time, I said, you remember what happened then, right? Let's talk about it now. Right? Because sometimes it's not always best to have that discussion because they're in that moment that they want that kid. They want that kid coming over, and they want to go there. They want, and what you're going to tell them is not going to resonate with them at all, because they're just focused that you're being the meanie, and you're not allowing them to have that kid over. You're not allowing them to go to that thing, right? And therefore, whatever you're going to tell them is not registering. So all you're doing is just talking negative about someone else without even the benefit of the kid learning. They're not focused on you. They're not. They're focused on what they want. You just have to say, sorry, you're not getting that right now. Later time, sit them down, go to the room, sit them on the couch, whatever, and say, hey, listen, I just want to have that conversation with you now that you're calm and it's later and whatever. And, we're back on good terms because, you realize I do love you, right? Let's have this conversation of why I didn't let that happen, why I didn't let you go there, right? And then sometimes not. Sometimes, that's the lesson. There's no rule, right? There is rules saying that it's not always something that is always the same thing. You have to assess the situation, right? But the idea is talk positive, realize that you are the parent, right? And everything that we do, every way we talk, right, affects them and they act in that way. So you don't want them to start telling their friend, we can't hang out with that kid because they blah, 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 right? Okay, I've been talking for a long time and we usually don't do that. I'm gonna stop the recording actually.